Resident Evil 0 is the fifth major installment in the Resident Evil series and was released on the Nintendo Gamecube in 2002. It acted as a prequel to the original Resident Evil and covered the ordeals of STAR's Bravo team, who were sent to the Arklay Mountains in the outskirts of Raccoon City to investigate a series of grisly murders. The engine of the helicopter they were on fails and they crash into the forest. Officer Rebecca Chambers survives the crash, and while exploring the area, she comes across the Ecliptic Express, a train where its passengers have been turned to zombies because of T-virus infected leeches. While she explores the train, she runs into former Marine Billy Cohen, who was on his way to be executed for killing 23 people, but the military van he was being transported in crashed in the same area. The pair team up and try to uncover what is going on and find a way to escape. Resident Evil 0 features some unique mechanics that were not present in previous titles. The first and most obvious is the player's ability to control both Rebecca and Billy, who they can switch between in real time to solve puzzles and use their unique abilities. The second was Resident Evil 0 did not feature the famous item box. Instead, players will be able to pick up and drop items anywhere on the ground. The game received generally positive reviews by critics, but many felt Resident Evil 0 didn't do much to evolve the genre, and Capcom seemed to agree, as it was the final classic Resident Evil title to be released. But let's hop inside our hot tub time machines and head back to 1998. Resident Evil 2 had just been released and people were like, it was an extremely ambitious title that had to be released on two separate discs, which focused on either Claire or Leon's campaign. In what must have seemed like a crazy idea, a port was announced for the Nintendo 64, whose cartridges only had 64 megabytes of storage, which was significantly smaller than the optical discs used for other versions. After the developers summoned demons using black magic and sacrificed several children and animals, they were somehow able to port the massive Resident Evil 2 onto the Nintendo 64. That port was released in North America in late 1999 and Japan and Europe in early 2000. Coming off the success of this port, Capcom announced they were working on a prequel to the original Resident Evil, and it would be the first Resident Evil title exclusively released on the Nintendo 64. That title was Resident Evil 0. It was first unveiled during the Tokyo Game Show in 2000, when it was about 20% complete, and it was expected to be released in July 2000. Though it was ambitious and promising, development was halted due to the limitations on the Nintendo 64's cartridge space. With the GameCube's release just around the corner, Capcom decided to move the game over to that console, and it became the Resident Evil 0 we know and, depending on who you ask, we love. What I have always found interesting was the original prototype. Some grainy footage and images were leaked over the years which showed how the game would have looked and played, but Capcom released HD footage of the Resident Evil 0 prototype on Nintendo 64 and uploaded it on the official Resident Evil YouTube channel as part of a developer diary. This video was part of a series that was released in anticipation for the upcoming Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil Remake HD releases. The video featured the director of Resident Evil 0, Koji Oda, who talked about the prototype, its development, and the differences between it and the retail version. So after all that juicy backstory, we will now take a journey into the prototype world of survival horror and have a look at Resident Evil 0 on the Nintendo 64, and examine the differences between it and the version we got.
Resident Evil 0.
According to Mr. Oda, the prototype plays relatively the same as the retail version, but there are a variety of differences in terms of how certain events are executed. Surprisingly, Capcom wanted the player to be able to control both Rebecca and Billy in the Nintendo 64 version. An option to switch characters is seen in the inventory system. I'm assuming they thought this was possible because of the Resident Evil 2 port featuring two characters, but they were separated into separate campaigns. But the fact the devs were this ambitious is pretty commendable. The first difference is, instead of Rebecca seeing a zombie sitting in a train seat, thus triggering other zombies, the prototype triggers the zombies after Rebecca analyzes a radio on the ground next to a dead body. But this scene didn't play out in a CG cutscene like the original. Mr. Oda revealed that even though previous Resident Evil games were known for their CG cutscenes, his team had to work within the confines of the Nintendo cartridge's limited memory space, so they could not make a game that relied on pre-rendered movies or have large assets. That is why all the scenes in the prototype use in-game assets. Unsurprisingly, the voice work in the prototype's cutscenes were not used in the retail game. Instead, they re-recorded the lines of dialogue and also chose to change some of the voice actors. Rebecca's voice actor was changed for the retail version, but Mr. Oda was unsure whether the voice actor for Billy was the same in both versions. But the actual lines spoken in the cutscenes are very similar in both versions. The zombies in the prototype operated the same way as they did in the PS1 era of Resident Evil games. They would lumber towards the player and try to bite them. But the developers did look into making the zombies have the ability to run, which Mr. Oda said was the precursor for the Crimson Heads found in Resident Evil Remake. They also toyed with giving zombies special reactions when hit with certain guns. This was designed to make one-on-one fights with zombies more intense than in previous titles. The developers also thought about giving the player a counter-attack option when being bit. This could have also been a precursor to the defensive items found in Resident Evil Remake. As Rebecca is exploring the train, she enters a room and the camera switches to show a window. Outside, a group of zombies can be seen roaming around. Cleverly placed under the window was a green herb. The player would think that when they grabbed the green herb, the zombies would crash through the window, but this was a fake out used to trick the player. This moment was not in the retail version, which is a shame because it is pretty cool, and fake outs are always more scary than jump scares. One aspect of the game that stayed the same was Rebecca encountering Edwards. The scene plays out much like in the retail version, though Edwards' animations in the prototype are really choppy. This was because they had to use super simplistic motion capture for the prototype, and like the retail version, the dog jumps through the window as well. Once the dogs are killed, Rebecca enters a room using the train key, which is not the key used for this room in the retail version. Mr. Otis said this was done because the prototype was made for the Tokyo Game Show. They wanted to make this version's story flow in a way that allowed players to move around the level and immerse themselves in the game's atmosphere. He also said the gameplay and puzzles in the actual prototype were designed to really make the player think, even more so than in the final version. This was done by making each room feel like it was packed with puzzles. This direction was taken because the memory restrictions on the Nintendo 64's cartridge meant they couldn't show lots of enemies on screen at once. So they had to make sure they left plenty of room for the player's imagination and create terrifying situations that couldn't be resolved by action alone. One major change that was initially going to be in the game was that Rebecca and Billy could die. The player would be able to clear the game if only one of them survived. I'm assuming the best ending would have been both Billy and Rebecca making it out alive, but that idea was quickly scrapped after they realized that if Rebecca died, it would have affected the timeline as she appears in the original Resident Evil. Though there were several limitations imposed on the developers, they were going to use the 64DD to increase the performance of the game. The 64DD was a magnetic disk drive peripheral that was released only in Japan on December 1st, 1999. It attached to the bottom of the Nintendo 64 console and used floppy disks, which contained an additional 64 megabyte of rewritable data. Nintendo released this attachment because developers wanted more memory to create games for its console. How this would have enhanced Resident Evil 0 was by greatly reducing load times, better rendered character models, allow enemies to chase players across an entire room, and allow players to use multiple controllers for local co-op play, a feature that was not included in the retail version. But because of the DD64's failure in the Japanese market, Capcom decided to develop the game using the standard N64 cartridge, and as I mentioned before, this didn't work out and the game was released on the Gamecube instead. No matter your opinions on the final product, it is hard to deny the ambition Capcom had in regards to developing Resident Evil 0 for the Nintendo 64. And it's surprising that the concept of the game, at least from what we've seen, didn't change much from the retail product. They had a clear vision and knew the changes they wanted to bring to the Resident Evil series. The only thing that was hindering them was technological limitations. I would love for a ROM of this prototype to leak so fans can get their hands on such an interesting game. We have Resident Evil 1.5, so we need Resident Evil -0. Thank you for watching this little video of mine. My next few videos are going to be Resident Evil focused. This wasn't really planned, I've just been playing a fuckload of Resident Evil and I have a lot to talk about. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, and if you are new around here in my part of YouTube and enjoy my content, please subscribe. For those who already have, hey, welcome back friend. I also have a Patreon where you can support the channel and help it grow. For as little as $1, you will get access to my videos one day early and access to my Discord. If you contribute at a higher tier, you will get other rewards and bonus content such as a Q&A video and a monthly video where I discuss everything horror. But every contribution, no matter how small, is greatly appreciated, and I thank everyone who has signed up to my Patreon. Big shout out to my patrons Sleight of Tongue, Walter, Devon John Malone and Sam Barclay. I would break into Capcom to get you all a copy of the Resident Evil 0 prototype.